Good evening, and I'm so sorry I can't be with you this evening. As Christy may have already told you, I'm in Ohio as part of the task force to assist the Office of Pastoral Development for the Episcopal Church. That's the part of the presiding bishop's office that helps oversee and facilitate and support elections of bishops around the country and across the Episcopal Church. And we have several stories in which things didn't go as well as they should. And so General Convention was very intentional in trying to improve our procedures and policies and our approach to election of bishops so that those can be healthy ones and be life-giving for the church. So I'm glad to be a part of that. I'll look forward to returning home later this week. But I do want to be with you in this important work of forgiveness as we are continuing in our third week here. And I intend to share what I have in the slides that you should have a copy of at your table. And we'll continue to have our usual practice of opportunity to share with one another at your tables and partners at your tables and with a conversation that I'm so grateful Canon Chapman is going to facilitate for you. As a way of background and review, the overview of the 3-week series is that we are about this work of forgiveness because it is our work to do. In fact, the prophets say that the path of forgiveness is the way back to God. Jesus is clear that nothing is more important than this work of forgiveness in our spiritual journeys. We've talked about and we'll recap what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not. And if you don't have the slides yet for week 1 or week 2, just ask Christy for them and she can get you a copy of them. They're also on the website. We're using a model developed by Desmond Tutu and others that experienced remarkable and radical forgiveness as a part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa 2 or 3 decades ago. And it's moving from the revenge cycle to this forgiveness experience that we will continue to talk about tonight. We want to continue to approach the opportunities for forgiveness in our lives and how those present themselves. And we want to know how we practice forgiveness of oneself. And we'll delve into that near the end of this evening. As we've stated before, there's 2 presuppositions for the series. One is that there is nothing in all the world that cannot be forgiven, and no one is inherently undeserving of forgiveness. We experience it as our shared humanity. So to summarize that fourfold path, moving away from the left-hand side of the slide that hopefully you have there with the violence and the cruelty leading to hurt or harm and the pain that leads to, the desire for revenge, but then moving on into a repetitive and recurrent cycle of that violence and cruelty that are habituated in our culture and in the ways that we tend to react to the experience of hurt. But the opportunity is to choose to heal and move to the right side of the path, which is this fourfold path of forgiveness, of telling the story, naming the hurt, recognizing and acknowledging our shared humanity, and renewing or releasing the relationship. We've talked a lot about that. We'll talk some more again this evening. The fourfold path is not a linear one. It's not always predictable in the speed with which you can work through it. It may take a lifetime in some situations. In others, it might not be so difficult. We find that the more intimate the relationship in which the betrayal or the mistrust or the brokenness has occurred, the more difficult it is for that forgiveness to occur. But in all of it, we're encouraging you to be gentle with yourself, be gentle with the other. It's okay to say, I need more time, or I'm not there yet, or I want to, but I can't yet. I am sorry are difficult words, but they're most difficult when we really mean them. And they are incredibly hurtful still when we don't mean them. We've spoken some about the active listening technique and that we are not there when we are listening with someone else to try to fix something or to offer advice. We don't need to bring our own sense of loss or grief in a way that tries to corroborate or turn the thing out from them to us instead. We need to keep confidentiality because it's not our story when someone is sharing it with us. And we offer love and care in all of that. And we empathize and we offer comfort. Those are the ways that we can listen to one another and embody this Christ mandate of loving one another as we work through this important spiritual endeavor of forgiveness. Now, I want to pause here and encourage some table conversation that Christy will facilitate there. And I have 3 questions to be offered as prompts. You don't have to deal with all of those, but certainly choose what it is that you want to talk about. What's been most surprising or striking for you in what we've discovered and discussed these first 2 weeks, or in the summary I've just given if you weren't able to be here in previous weeks? Have you ever noticed how many plot lines of books or movies or plays focus on revenge, that revenge is really the plot line rather than forgiveness? And yet at the end of the movie or at the end of the book, it seems really not very satisfying. Why is it such a prevailing motif, this vengeance model for us in our culture? Or do you believe that there can be no healing without forgiveness, as Archbishop Tutu suggests? So those are just 3 prompts. Spend about 10 minutes at your table discussing them. Christy will bring you back with a plenary, and then we'll begin another video after that. So I think this is the hardest part of not being there with you, is that I don't get to hear the rich wisdom that you're sharing coming back from your table conversation. I hope to hear a little bit of that from Christy that was shared broadly in the group. But we turn now to the work at hand for our evening tonight. Last week we focused on how do we grant forgiveness using the fourfold path, and tonight we're going to focus in this next segment on how we seek forgiveness when we are the one who has done wrong. First, let me say that this is hard work. Sometimes it's harder even to seek forgiveness than to grant it to someone else. And I think you know that already. It's something in which we have to be responsible. We have to accept responsibility for our deeds, and we have to speak the truth in the way that we confess it, and those make us uncomfortable. I think there's a part of human nature which really just wants us to try to push it away and project it on someone or something else. I remember when I was in 2nd grade, my mother had taken us all to a store that none of us wanted to go to. I was one of 4 kids, and she left us in the car parked right in front of the store door, and while she went in and did her shopping. And I'm not sure why we did it, but we all had straws from McDonald's. We'd gotten a Coke or whatever for us to drink while she was in the store. And before we knew it, we were shooting spit wads at women who were walking into this fabric store. It's just, there's no reason by which I can explain what we were thinking. But as you can imagine, my mother was infuriated. She was so angry that she decided it was one of those, just wait till your father gets home to deal with you. And so my father gets home that evening. We're all at the dinner table, and they're saying, what made y'all do that? And my oldest brother shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. And my sister, who was the next in order, shrugged her shoulders and said, I don't know. And then I, in this fit of just breaking into tears, I said, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it as a way of projecting it out into something else. We've got to accept our own responsibility for our deeds. And yeah, there was evil working in all of that. We could get down in those weeds, but just to recognize it's accepting the responsibility for what we do, and not project it on something or someone else. I hope that that story was something of a little levity for you. It is still the thing that my family teases me about almost 50 years later. When we speak the truth, it's a way that we're confessing what it is that we've done wrong, and that there are really 4 steps to this, that we have to admit the wrong and take ownership for it. We need to be able to witness the anguish that someone else experiences, the naming the pain that they experience as a result of it. We have to apologize, and we need to ask for forgiveness, and we'll unpack that here in a few moments. And then it's always with this invitation to renew the relationship whenever possible, or if it's not possible to renew it safely, then how do we release it? So on the next slide then, the first step is, how do we admit the wrong? We must be willing to answer any and all questions that the victim may have as they try to understand not only the who, what, when, where, and how, but also even the why. Even if we can't always name those things, let's not sidestep them. Let's not avoid the self-justification or the excuses. The way to approach that is to say, yes, I was thoughtless, I was selfish, I wasn't thinking of your feelings, I take responsibility for it. It was not the way of sidestepping. I was angry, I wasn't in my right mind, the devil made me do it, whatever those things are. There are consequences that usually will come from this, but we must accept them gracefully. Well, let me just say, there are always consequences. And we'll unpack that more in just a bit as well. But accepting the consequences is part of the healing process, not only for the person who was harmed, but also for us who are seeking the forgiveness. So then the second step is witnessing and holding the anguish with the other person. It is not our place to argue. It is not our place to accuse back. It is not our place to try to push the pain away, even though that's human nature, it's natural enough. We must acknowledge the harm that we caused and just be willing to rest with that without a need to justify those actions. In all of it, we must be willing to answer all of those questions honestly and thoroughly. When they ask, we must answer, even if it's uncomfortable. We must mean what we say. If you say, I'm sorry, but it's really a shallow or not heartfelt, the person will sense that. Even if it's at a subconscious level, there will be a sense that something's not square here. If you can't make this apology in person, know that there are resources available on the internet and even a hotline that you can access and work through your side of the process of admitting the wrong and acknowledging the anguish and answering the questions that you think would need to be answered. And I've listed on your slide a few of the places that you can go to do that. You can certainly write a letter if you can't speak to the person. Either they're not willing, they're not available, or you may not even know who they are. Thirdly, as we ask for forgiveness, as I said, we have to be honest. Not heartfelt, I am sorry, really doesn't mean much, and it won't lend to the healing that we're seeking in all of this. Express a desire to do things differently. Repent, which is to say, I want to do it differently, and make amends. Making amends can come in all sorts of ways. It can be assuring the person that this won't happen again, and you need to make that assurance in a way that they can trust that that is so. It may be that you have to take the consequences of people learning what it is that you've done, that you didn't want anyone. It may be that there is restitution to be made. It may be that there are reparations to be made. It may be that there are legal consequences in all of this. But in it all, assure the victim that it is your desire and your heartfelt, fervent commitment not to happen, that it won't happen again. Now, they may not always forgive. even when you're asking for it. And what do you do when that's the case? Certainly don't force the issue. Don't try to pressure them into forgiving. It may take time. It may take a long time. It may take a lifetime. It may take even into the afterlife for us to experience the fullness of restoration of relationship, however that ends up being. But especially in those intimate relationships, when that betrayal has happened, it can just take a long time. As I said, make amends, atone when you can, work the fourfold path, even if the other person is not able to go with you across all of it. And then as we look to renew the relationship, you must take the victim's lead. If they're not ready to renew, then rest with the uncertainty of how it will come. Remember that it's not forgetting what happened. It's not going back to what was before. The relationship will always be informed by this breach of trust, by this brokenness of the relationship. So that's a path of seeking forgiveness. And now I want to invite you back into a tandem relationship of conversation. Pair up, or if you need to move to a different table, you can certainly do that. But here are a couple of the prompts for you to consider in your conversation. It will take about 15 minutes to do, and then Christy will gather you back up. First, think about a time when you have sought forgiveness, and how did the other respond, and what ultimately happened. Unpack it, kind of decipher it in this. Or how have you felt when you sought forgiveness, but the other was unable or unwilling to forgive you? So spend some time with that, and we'll come back afterwards, and in the third piece of this evening, we'll speak about how we forgive ourselves. Well, thank you for the sharing that you have done together, 2 or 3 people together. I know that that's holy work, and I hope that those conversations will continue. We turn now to how we forgive ourselves. Many of us come from a place where we have a deep-seated sense of inadequacy or low self-esteem or unworthiness that may have been generated out of our childhood experience, out of the parenting that we had, out of the betrayals and the losses that we've had across our lifetimes of experience. And it may be really hard for us to move beyond those things, but that is the work to which we're called. And the forgiveness of ourselves is an important part of the work that enables us to then reclaim how it is that we are created in God's image, which means that there is an inherent goodness in each of us. And it's how we're able to acknowledge the humanity in ourselves that is shared with the others that we come across in our lives. And so that's part of the work that we have. It's important to distinguish between the notion of guilt and shame. There are any number of ways to do this. There have been whole volumes of theological reflection written on this. But in a nutshell, this is how I get my hands around it, and I might offer to you to consider. Guilt is the God-given gift that each of us have, deeply seated within our souls, within our beings, that helps us understand when we've missed the mark. That's the definition of sin. When we've missed the mark in some way, and the resulting effect is the breaking of the relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, or with creation. We were created to be in right relationship with all of those, God, self, others, and creation. And by the way, the academic efforts in all 4 of those are paralleled with the work of theology and psychology and sociology and ecology. So this is the work that we're all about, whether we recognize it in that way or not. But guilt is that inner compass which helps us know when we've missed the mark and we need to reorient or repent in a different way of living. It's about the actions that we've had in our lives. Shame, on the other hand, is about the being. It's about the person. It's about saying, you have missed the mark. You are missing the mark. You are a miss of the mark. And you are not worthy of that inherent goodness that God has called you into. Shame really has a lot of potential for destructive effects in our lives. Guilt can, when we hold on to it in a perseverating way, but guilt is that thing which helps us reorient into new life. So having said that, let me say that self-forgiveness is not a free pass. This is not a way to just excuse your behavior. It's a way of acknowledging it. It's a way of avoiding the rationalized avoidance of spiritual work that we're all called to. Let's just forget about it. I'm forgiving myself. We'll move on. I don't have to think about that. That's not really forgiveness. I think you know that. We are not defined by what we have done. That is not what defines us. Anyone who has ever had a child or cared for a child knows the child will step across a boundary or a line and misbehave, but they want to be invited back into right relationship. And remember that nothing is unforgivable in all of life if we're working off of that presupposition. This work of self-forgiving is similar to the fourfold path. We tell the truth to ourselves. We acknowledge the hurt that we have caused ourselves or others. We forgive ourselves. And then how do we renew the relationship with ourselves so that we understand that inherent goodness and that God's image in ourselves? In all of this, I might suggest that you consider what we in the church know as the sacrament of reconciliation. It's more colloquially known as the sacrament of private confession. It's when you sit with a priest and you acknowledge, you confess your faults, your brokenness, your sins. There may be something in particular that you're wanting to, or just the sense of that lostness that you want to. Know that it is always, always a confidential arrangement in a pastoral setting in which the priest will listen, may admonish or encourage you to some good work that helps you understand your goodness and perhaps make amends or atone or make reparation for the hurt and the harm that you've caused. But in all of it then, there is the pronunciation, the pronouncement of God's forgiveness and the opportunity for you to forgive yourself in that as well. You can do that anytime with a priest by making a private appointment with one of them here, or if you would rather go to another priest elsewhere, we are all available to do so. So then if we just kind of, as we come to a close in the series, knowing that our work is never really going to be done in this, and this hopefully is just the beginning, let me just summarize that forgiveness is hard work, but it is the spiritual work to which we are called across our lifetime. It may not come as linear work or in a predictable fashion according to a particular timeline, but it is the path to healing and peace. I believe that with all my heart, and I hope that you do as well. Be gentle with yourself in it, in all of it. Find compassion for the other who has wronged you. Acknowledge that shared humanity you share, and go about the work with intention and with deliberate sense of compassion for yourself and for those who have wronged you as well. Whenever possible, renew the relationship, always only if it's a safe thing to do, and when not, release the relationship and move along from that, learning from it and experiencing the healing even then. As we think about homework, which is not really an assignment to come back to the class for, since we won't plan to meet again as a group in this anytime soon, but I would encourage you to develop or continue your journaling practice and devote some intentional effort to reflecting on the work of forgiveness in your life, and be about the work of healing in your own life and in those around you through the work of forgiveness granted and received. I've listed the bibliography once more. It's a select bibliography. You could get a lifetime of reading on this topic, and I hope that you will read some and continue the conversations in it all. May you all know God's blessings this night, and from Ohio, I send you my love and affection, and am grateful for the mutual joy and bonds that we share at St. Mark's Cathedral. Good night.